Chapter 31. The Underground Palace. Dragon energy converges within the node. Yang takes but a single path to constrict, while Yin does not spread without five. The phrase from the Quelling Dragon Decree essentially reversed the earlier sequence we performed in the temple. Completing the last notch, the celestial brick wall in front of us opened at our manipulation, and Fatty, gripping his assault rifle, led the way out of the corridor, with the rest of the team trailing behind. Emerging from the underground corridor, we used flashlights to inspect the vast space around us. Although an underground structure, the expanse was grand, with remnants of ornate beams and columns hinting at its former magnificence. We were undoubtedly in the underground palace. We seemed to be in the palace's main hall, and the brick wall that served as an exit was carefully concealed behind a jade throne, ingeniously crafted to be indistinguishable from the rest of the hall when observed from within. We had reached Jingjue's royal palace, once thought to exist only in legend. To gain a better look, we used all the lighting equipment we had brought along, revealing that the throne and the floor of the grand hall were constructed of jade. The ceiling's decorative lamp fixtures had decayed and broken down, scattering on the floor, and in the corners, some jerboas scurried about, indicating air circulation. Apart from some jade wares, items made of pottery, wood, iron, copper, and silk were significantly damaged from exposure to air. It was a mixed blessing for us. On one hand, the circulation of air in the underground palace suggested connectivity with underground watercourses, giving hope to Yi Sin's critical need for water. On the other hand, the poor state of the antique relics within the palace was disheartening. Some pottery had decayed to the point of crumbling to dust upon touch, and their surroundings were littered with numerous rusted pieces of armor and weapons, featuring designs like the crescent sword, the crane-beak axe, and the concave-backed blade, adorned with culturally distinctive decorations and buckles. Yet, their owners were long gone, their skeletons reduced to fragmented skulls. The artifacts had succumbed to the ravages of time and air erosion, compounded by the presence of jerboas that had infiltrated the palace at some point. Jerboas typically feed on desert plant roots and subterranean insects, favoring hard objects to gnaw on. Much of what was in the underground palace had been chewed away by these rodents. The jade throne was the best-preserved item in the main hall, carved with a red jade eye at the top, with gold and silver inlaid throughout its body, depicting immortal mountains and mist, various flowers, birds, fish, and beasts. The base of the throne was a massive block of jade as white as sheep's milk, which stood out prominently against the dark tones of the grand hall. Seeing the dilapidated state surrounding him, Fatty plopped down on the jade throne in despair, tapping on the armrest. "Looks like this is the only thing of any value left. Everything else might as well be sent to scrap," he remarked disappointingly. I couldn't help but think he never changed his carefree nature, lacking discipline. To prevent embarrassment in front of Shirley Yang and the others, I teased him, "Comrade Wang Kaishan, remember this is the seat where the feudal ruling class once sat. Don't forget, you also come from a family of revolutionary cadres. By sitting there, are you abandoning your principles and stance?" Fatty laughed it off. "Oh, old who, are you playing the commissar now? What era are we in that you talk about stance? Do you think this jade throne is worth $1 million? But man, it's too big. We can't just cart it back." I tried to snap him back to reality. "Don't think about how to haul it back yet. I tell you, don't be so sure. This very throne belonged to the Jingjue queen. What if her spirit is wandering this underground palace? She's been lonely and isolated for thousands of years, and now that you've sat on her throne, she might see you, a big, sturdy fellow, and think, what a catch for the Jingjue country, a fine son-in-law. If she gets bored, she might as well keep you around for a chew." My words didn't frighten Fatty, but they did scare Yi Sin, who had already regained consciousness. Hearing talk of the deceased queen's ghost in the palace caused Yi Sin to faint once again. Shirley Yang, frustrated, scolded us. "Can't you two stop goofing around? Look at the time. Help out, for goodness sake." Realizing we had caused trouble again, Fatty and I didn't dare to argue any further. We went over to lift up Yi Sin and placed her on Fatty's back. Muttering that he hadn't gotten a good deal, Fatty continued to grumble about the absurdity of my earlier comment. The queen's husband as a reverse dowry son-in-law? Haven't met someone as uncultured as you. What's the term for the queen's husband supposed to be? Surely not some concubine, right? Shirley Young, unable to bear Fatty's non-stop chattering, retorted annoyed, it's called a eunuch. If not for the somber fact that Hal Igua had previously died on the expedition, lightening the mood with laughter would hardly be appropriate. We all restrained ourselves and began searching for a water source in the vast underground palace. The underground palace of the ancient Jingjue kingdom was not as expansive as I had imagined. The main hall was substantial, but the side halls were simpler. The front entrance and the stone steps were completely sealed with sand, and near the entrance, a section of the black stone ceiling showed damage from explosives, indicating that someone had reached the underground palace before us. From the extent of the damage and the traces left, it would seem it happened decades ago, likely by the same person from the black and white photo we found, now buried under the sands. After examining the side halls, we proceeded to the back hall, which appeared to be the royal family's living quarters. There were several jade fountains encased in jade railings, but all dried up. As we looked around, Shirley Young suddenly said, "Listen, can you hear running water?" I listened intently and indeed heard the tranquil sound of flowing water not far away, presumably from behind the sleeping chambers. We followed the sound, with quickened pace, to a cave behind the hall. The cave led down into the depths, opening into a cavern the size of a sports field. Though natural, it was clearly reworked by human hands. The floor was remarkably even. Inside the cavern was a small underwater lake with a raised outcrop acting as a tiny central island, just about 10 square meters in size, with still waters mirroring the surrounding environment. Having been rationed to the bare minimum water supply for a week, the sight of fresh underground water was too tempting to resist. Despite being in the desert, we all longed for a generous drink, and the clear water was an irresistible lure. Shirley Young cautioned everyone. This water source has been abandoned for years. It's unclear if it's stagnant or running water, and underground streams often change course. Present-day underground water may not be the same as it was millennia ago. The western regions are notorious for having high nitrates in the water, and we need to make sure it's safe before drinking. Upon closer inspection, I noticed several colorful fish swimming in the water, which led me to reassure everyone, this lake supports fish, and there must be a spring deeper in to keep it replenished, thus it's unlikely to be poisonous. With that, everyone else stopped worrying and rushed to the lakeside to quench their thirst vigorously, filling themselves until they could drink no more, satisfied only when water spilled from their mouths with each movement. Yi Sin was suffering from dehydration and couldn't directly drink large amounts of water. Shirley Young mixed some salt into a jug of water and administered it to her slowly. We had all drunk so much water that we could hardly move and had no choice but to rest on the spot. Never before had water tasted as delightful as it did then. I lay on the ground, splayed out with my stomach bloated, eyes closed, conserving energy. When the surroundings quieted down, it seemed that I could hear the sound of flowing water in the distance. Apparently, there were more water veins in the underground palace than just the one at this small lake, which was very calm. The sound of water I heard in the back hall came from a different, possibly larger source. Maybe even a subterranean river, perhaps the one passing through the Zaglama Mountains known as the Zidu Dark River. As I was lost in thought, I suddenly heard Shirley Young exclaim in surprise. Quickly pushing myself up to sit, I asked what was the matter. She pointed toward the raised area in the center of the lake, signaling me to look there. Professor Chen and the others got up as well, and everyone followed Shirley Yang's direction to witness an incredible sight. The raised area in the lake was, at some point, covered with a dense layer of green phosphorescent insects numbering in the thousands. Their bodies were gradually turning gray-white as they wriggled out of their exoskeletons. Numerous insects, just freed from their shells, seemed to generate a bioluminescent glow, twinkling like stars scattered across the night sky. With newly formed wings, they'd soon be taking flight. At that moment, countless large rats darted into the cave from all directions. Fearless of humans and ignoring our presence, they leaped into the lake, swarming towards the elevated ground. Voraciously, they seized the freshly molted insects, consuming them hastily. In a whirlwind of activity, The rats cleaned the area of insects in just moments. Witnessing all these rats swimming in the lake suggested they frequently dined here. Otherwise, how could they be so adept at it? The thought itself made us feel sick, and we turned and vomited, emptying our stomachs of the water we had just so eagerly drunk.